Press Here is sponsored in part by Barracuda Networks, cloud-connected security and storage solutions that simplify IT. City National Bank, providing loans and lines of credit to help Northern California businesses grow.
Luke Kanies may be the world's best boss. Find out how he's changing the way people think about work. Plus, why LinkedIn employees are constantly updating their resumes and predicting the future of Hollywood in a high-tech world. Our reporters, Jennie Wong of the Charlotte Observer and Hannah Kuchler of the Financial Times, this week on Press Here. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott McGrew. In this always-on texting and twittering Wi-Fi world, a lot of us never really stop working, even when we want to stop, even on a Saturday.
I'm gonna need you to go ahead and come in tomorrow. So if you could be here around 9, that would be great. Okay? Oh, and I almost forgot. I'm also gonna need you to go ahead and come in on Sunday, too, okay?
Every office worker's favorite movie, Office Space. Staying at the office for an outrageous amount of time was a startup badge of honor, but perhaps no more. Luke Kanies is one of a number of bosses who doesn't need you to come in on a Saturday. And his vacation policy, I'm not sure he has one. Luke runs Puppet Labs, an IT outfit out of Portland, Oregon, joined by Jennie Wong of the Charlotte Observer, Hannah Kuchler of the Financial Times as well. All right, well, you must have a vacation policy, but it's not strict like the one we have here at NBC, right?
Well, thank you for having me here. And yes, we do have a vacation policy. We looked into having an unlimited policy, but when you look at what behavior that actually drives in organizations, what we find is in most cases what that results is people don't take any vacation at all.
Which is fascinating in and of itself.
Exactly.
All right, so it's not unlimited, but you don't count the number of days that somebody takes, which in my mind is kind of the same thing.
It's essentially an honor system, and you work with your manager and your team, and if your manager and your team say, you will not be screwing us by going and spending a couple weeks out, then you go spend some time out. And you know, it's much more about what works for your team and what works for you than it is about what works for the company per se.
Now, on your careers page for Puppet Labs, it says that you guys insist that your employees take some of their time off. So what do you think is the minimum needed to prevent burnout, and how do you enforce that?
You know, I feel like vacation and burnout, they're clearly related, but burnout is much more of a week-by-week thing than it is a quarter-by-quarter or a year-by-year. So you can easily take a month off or 2 months off every year and still be completely burnt out, or you could take no time off and not be burnt out. But for me, if you aren't taking at least 2 or 3 weeks off every year, you've got something wrong.
Well, I take 2 or 3 weeks off every year, but I had no idea we were talking about a month off. Employees are able to just take a month off.
Well, our policy is 4 weeks, I believe, and so you could.
You're the CEO, and you're not quite sure. I mean, which is I'm complimenting you on that. I mean, that's fantastic that you don't quite know what your vacation policy is.
Well, I know what the policies are, but the technical terms all vary a little bit. So you do get 4 weeks. I think it'd be rare that one person would use all of their vacation in one lump sum, both because you end up wanting to use a little bit on the holidays and a little bit to do a small trip, and then you want to do maybe one large trip. So I'm going to do a 2-week trip in the spring.
Otherwise, you're not counting anyway. So, right.
So tell me a bit more about what happened when you did have unlimited, because I think that would just make me feel really bad about taking leave, and I would prefer an entitlement, maybe quite a large entitlement. I do take quite a lot of vacation. I am European. But what happened?
So we never actually instituted unlimited because we looked at Netflix. We looked at, there are studies that kind of, there's the story around unlimited, and then you look at the studies that study people's behavior when they have unlimited, and if you do unlimited vacation, you have to pair that with minimum vacation policies too, because otherwise what will happen is, and you kind of referenced this earlier, it becomes a badge of, well, I could, but I won't. And so you look up and a year later and everyone's kind of racing to take the least vacation possible. And I think that's the real problem in most startups is there's no benefit to working as hard as people do. And in many cases, it's actually detrimental to your organization, but we all feel like we have to be busy all the time, right?
I'm curious about your personal approach to recharging. Do you tend to prefer shorter, more frequent breaks, like a long weekend every month, or do you like to have one long vacation a year?
Yes. Yeah, so I do both.
It's good to be the king.
Well, so I haven't worked weekends in about 6 or 8 years. And so one of the things that I do is Friday night, so we do an all hands every week, and we kind of talk about what went on this week, introduce new employees. And when I walk into that all hands, obviously I'm not checking my email during the all hands, and I don't check my email again until usually at the earliest Saturday afternoon. And even then, that's more like I might scan through and go, is anything on fire? But I learned a long time ago that if you can take the full weekend off, if you can actually do something else, think about something else, and usually you think about work, but you're not checking in, you're not doing things, it really makes a difference.
I realize that Netflix does some of this in some other companies, but do you think this is sort of an Oregon thing and not a Silicon Valley thing? Because Silicon Valley's badge of honor has always been, oh man, I was at the office until, and sleeping under the desk and that kind of stuff.
I don't think so, because if you look at the studies that have been, I mean, they go all the way back to Taylor that say there's a certain amount of time that you can work up to that amount of time, and it varies a little bit by person and by trade, but pretty much every study says above about 55 hours a week, you're not getting more done, and much above that, you're actually getting, you're actively working against yourself, right?
Yes.
What about the length of the days? I've seen some offices go to a model where they actually shut the office at 6 o'clock or whatever, and some of them even convert it into something that's used in for evening classes or something that makes people go home. Have you considered that?
We haven't really considered that. What we do are we do have a few kegs in the office, and there are a couple areas where there's one particular lounge that has what appears to be a cocktail making station.
Isn't that just encouraging people to stay longer?
Well, it's encouraging you to switch from work at least, right? So it's time to stop typing.
I'm trying to imagine the NBC HR people. Kind of, we're not counting the vacation, and we have kegs, and I'm never imagining that happening. Or Financial Times, for that matter.
No kegs. I've tried so hard.
How many employees do you have, Luke?
We're about 335, maybe 340.
Is this something where if you get bigger, it won't work? In the sense that, schools don't want to have dress code policies, but there's going to be the one kid who shows up to school in something that's inappropriate. Therefore, they have to have a dress code policy, which, 99.9% of the children were never going to violate in the first place. Is there some point in which you're just going to have more stricter policies because of the one guy?
Not as long as we have good management, right? So one of the things is this saves us a ton of money. We spend far less on administrative costs because we don't have a central HR person keeping track of every single person's hours and reporting and managing that, right? So it saves us money. So as we get bigger, it's going to save us more and more money, which is great. And then the reality is, it doesn't matter how good your policies are. There's going to be somebody who finds a way to break the policy in a way that kind of you go, oh no, I have to redo the policy. No, what you need is good management who can say, I will use my brain in combination with the policy to make a decision. And as long as you have managers who are willing to own the decision and are willing to be intelligent about it, you never have to have stupid policies.
Luke Kanies, surviving in a world of grown-ups, and I suspect you're going to get a few applications as well after people see this, probably from a couple of us as well. Luke Kanies with Puppet Labs, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, up next, how we define our relationship with work when Press Here continues.